How are we all doing today? I hope your week is going well. Thank you for tuning in to episode 2 of the Hunting the Empire podcast. Today I'm joined by Eric Hansen, a bow hunter from central New York. On this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about how Eric sets up his farm, his practices of quality deer management, and how that's changed his hunting profile at his farm. And we're also going to talk about his time that he's been with Midwest Whitetail. I know you guys are really going to enjoy this podcast today. Had a great time talking with Eric. He had a lot of really good information. Let's get started, and if you want to go ahead and just tell us about yourself. What do you do for a living, and how did you get into hunting?
So I grew up my whole life on a farm, family farm. So I've been surrounded by deer my whole life. It's weird. My dad and grandfather were hunters, so they initially got me into it, but they were, I would call them casual hunters. So, pretty focused on the farm. It takes a lot of effort to make that tick. So, like I said, I grew up there. It was the fourth generation in our family farm. It actually started in 1919. So I'm blessed to be able to do that for a living. And I always tell people that you don't always farm, because it's the most lucrative money-making job there is. It's the lifestyle. And along with that lifestyle for me has been growing up appreciating the outdoors, but in particular deer.
Okay. So is it so it sounds like in your family that it's kind of a hunting family, so you grew up with it. Was it more your dad or your grandpa, or who really got you into hunting when you were a kid?
Yeah, it was both really. They were strictly gun hunters. So, you probably remember how it is when you're a kid and it's opening day gun season was more exciting than Christmas.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's how I got started. And then, I went to some, there's an event that the southern tier of New York, it's called the Antler Roundup. It was held in the Volca, New York back in, oh my gosh, probably the late 90s. And it was like guys like Charlie Alsheimer got this whole QDM thing kick-started in this area. And, I, my dad and grandfather were of the old school, I'll call it the old school mindset, never shoot does, shoot anything that had antlers. And initially, that's how I got started thinking. But lucky enough, I guess, I consider it lucky that I was down there and heard this message about QDM and what comes with that, the potential. And I totally just bought into it. Like, I was just from an early age, I just had no desire to just go out and kill any buck. I automatically wanted to push the envelope a little bit, find out, what we could do with this. And it just took off like crazy because, you know how it goes. It starts with just the deer, then it evolves into all the work that goes along with it. And it's just, it's gotten pretty intense over the years. And here we are today. And I look back at those times like, well, when we first talked, it gets you really thinking about how did this all start and what you thought was possible then and what you think is possible now. Definitely.
Yeah. Um, so I know. So you're hunting the family farm, and you're
Hmm.
working on it now. I'm curious if you could kind of unpack it a little bit, kind of focusing on this QDM stuff. What are you doing on your own farm now, um, that that kind of lets you shift the deer herd that you have been over the past number of years? What kind of QDM have you guys implemented on your farm, and what have you found that really works? And is there stuff that you found that hasn't really worked that well for you?
Yeah. I'll start out by saying when I tell people I live on a farm and that we farm about 3,000 acres, everybody automatically thinks that, oh my gosh, you got all sorts of hunting ground and it's easy. But when I say I farm 3,000 acres, I mean I have very small amounts of wooded cover area. So one of the first things that I did is I had to get serious about posting the ground and what I call keeping it sacred. And that was not getting done. I mean, my dad and grandfather hunted, but the hunting method and then the amount of people that they let hunt wasn't going to work for what I wanted to do because there was very few people that had that similar mindset at that time. So the first thing is I needed to patrol and post and just get the word out that some of the things that were being done in the past aren't going to be happening anymore because I want to get into this QDM and really make things better. So that's number one. And then from there, I looked at this properties and I just said, all right, how can I keep the deer on these small areas? And for me, that involved a hard hat, saw more than anything else, and then also planting trees in some of these open areas that traditionally were just mowed. Um, and I just decided, we're gonna make as much cover on the little amount of ground that we have to hold deer.
Okay. What kind of trees are you putting in there that you planted out there?
Yeah, predominantly in these particular areas, it's been pine. It's been Norway spruce, white pine, and I'm doing it for thermal cover because I didn't have a lot of that, and they grow fast, and it's natural like a visual screen as well. Because when you're dealing with these small areas, the deer need to feel secure, and some of that is the visual aspect of it. If it's just a wide open area, they're not going to feel secure there. So multiple reasons, but I've planted some various, I'll call them, shrubbery that I don't, I just plant them and I've never fenced any of this out. I figure, I don't mow or anything. I just figured, hey, I'll play the numbers game, throwing trees out there and eventually they come and, that's what happens. And, if I got 50% stand, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so you're working on getting the farm set up. You're putting out trees um, to give deer places to get into. What do you do any food plots or basically do you just use your crop on the farm as your food?
Yeah, I do both. Kind of the way I work it is I look at the farm fields, the big ones is, destination plots, if you want to call them that. That's been a kind of a trendy word to use.
Yeah.
They can feed a lot of deer, but also do a lot of food plots. So I'll do small areas, um, closer to cover, certain areas. That area that I told you about, my project for 10 years has been planting trees, but right next to that, there's also a area that I started to farm as well. It's just too small for our equipment.
Okay.
And, for me, yeah, we own the ground. I can make those decisions, but I've also told guys, these farmers, and the equipment gets bigger and bigger. There's little corners, like whether they're too shaded from trees or they're just too small to get equipment in. Those are great spots that you could have a food plot. I mean, you could ask the farmer, maybe throw him some money, say, listen, you mind this little half acre if I plant that to something and, you don't farm it. And, for us, that's what it's been. I mean, we can't afford to have a bunch of acres that we don't farm, we're in it to make money, but there are little areas that aren't profitable for a commercial farming operation. So, yeah, I do both, but those little small food plots are what I keep there because I have more control over it, and that's what keeps the deer. It keeps the good hunting longer. Throughout the season.
Yeah. For those smaller plots that you're putting in there and those kind of leftover pieces, how
Mhm.
how big do you think that those little plots are on average size?
I've got them anywhere from, I mean, I've got them as small as like 1/16 of an acre all the way up to, wow, 2 acres.
Okay, all right. When like, so probably I'm gonna guess, obviously you'll tell me that your your kind of bigger food plots are those like I would call them, I guess, a standard plot, like kind of like a field, a smaller field. Um,
Yeah, yeah, they could be. Yeah, I guess it'll depend really on the terrain and how big an area you got.
okay.
Um, but I'll dictate it more like this. If I've got a bigger plot that a bigger size, that's where I'm going to go to my soybeans, corn, where I got enough acreage there where they can withstand the deer pressure.
Hmm.
The smaller ones, it's not feasible to put that stuff in there because the deer it's just a numbers game. There's not enough plants there that can outgrow the browsing pressure.
Yeah.
So I'll stick with more of the clovers and winter rye works well. That grows just about on anything. Brassica mixes as well.
Okay. All right. So is that primarily what you plan, is mostly like brassicas and the clover, or is there other stuff in your food plots that you get into, or you just kind of found a mix in your area that works really well and that's what you stick with?
Yeah, again, it's access to it is going to play a big part of it. Clover is great, withstands a lot of pressure, but you also got to mow it to maintain it.
Mm.
So if I got a spot that's, I can't get a mower to, then I'm going to struggle putting clover in there. I might stick something that's pretty easy, like a winter rye. I'll plant that in late September. Just get, 3 stays tender, or use it into the late season. Um, but I've got places where I can get mowers into, or I make places I can get mowers into, and that's great to put clover. It might be a small plot, you got higher deer numbers, clover's great. And then I got more of these open areas, maybe right on the edge of a big farm field. That's where I'll try, the beans or the corn, things like that.
Okay. Now I
So I
know.
don't have, to answer your question, I mean, I'll mix it up. I like to mix it up for sure. This I like the variety. I like to have, it's good to have a consistent green source. Soybeans are great. They love them in the summer, like they're hammering them all summer. I've got the soybean plot that they love. But I know around October 1st, if I want to hunt October 1st, those beans are going to be in that in between stage. They're going to be that yellowish off color. They're not totally dried down yet, so the deer aren't going to be there. So in a spot like that, clover or some rye where they've got that green. The green never goes away,
Mm.
So that early October, I should have a spot that I expect to be more on that green source right next to the bean, and then transition into November and then the late season, they'll totally back on the beans.
Okay. All right. So it's kind of that. I think I've heard it. I'm not sure where in the past, but that green transition that
Yeah,
you got to kind of follow the food to where the deer are going to be.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Now, when you set up the farm with these plots that you're putting in, you say you've got a few thousand acres that you're working with. Do you know where um, your deer herds are bedding on your acreage, and then do you position your plots in a proximity to those, or you just kind of, I'm gonna put plots here, and they're probably gonna come here at some point, so that's where I'll put
Yeah.
them, or
Close to cover. I mean, for sure. So I'll work from where they bed. And when I mentioned earlier about using a chainsaw and stuff over the years, I mean, I've every potential area for cover that I own, I've had chainsaw going in the wintertime. And I'm a huge fan of TSI, hinge cutting. I'm a huge fan of that. And I try to make that bedding area as good as it can be. And then, yes, then I'll go backwards and say, all right, here's the bedding, here's the wind. predominant wind, or, you know, obviously I have multiple setups for the wind, but then I'll try to get some food in close proximity to that. And since it is relatively small cover type areas, I'm not going far into the cover at all. I mean, I'm on the edge of most of my, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here, but
Mm-hmm.
I probably don't have a stand more than 15 yards into any sort of cover. I
No,
mean,
no
it's
kidding.
on the
Okay.
edge. And, you know, the key to it is you got to be able to get to it and you got to be able to get out of it so the deer don't know they're being hunted.
Yep. Okay. So
That can
you
be
you
tricky.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, that can be tricky, but not always possible. But, you know, the best stands are the ones you can get in and out of without them knowing it.
Yeah. So you were saying earlier that you've got it's mostly ag field. You got these little blocks of timber, and it
Mhm.
sounds like your tactic is you don't go in those blocks of timber. You're staying on just the outskirts of those.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the only time we go in there uh, is if we've got to track one, and then during the off season, if we want to run the chainsaw, just want to scout in general, anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I call it sacred, and it takes so long to make things sacred. I mean, it takes years. I mean, deer have memories, and I can think back to when I first started this process. These deer weren't used to that area being sacred. So with the combination of the chainsaw and totally staying out of it, and years of that, years of that accumulation of that in that deer memory, whether it's an old doe that's been there her whole life or an old buck, they know those areas they can go to, and it's amazing. It works. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It works because those deer then relate that to safety. So it takes that accumulation of time to make that area sacred, and what so many people, you know, I don't want to say they don't get it, but they just don't grasp the concept of how you can mess that up. It takes years to get it, and it takes hours to mess it up. So you have to treat it like that. With, you know, majority of the hunters across this country don't have huge amount of acres, and it just makes it even more important to keep it sacred.
Hmm. You mentioned scouting in there. Now, this is a
Mhm.
farm that you've grown up on, that you basically live on. These deer are living with you. You're living with them. You're watching them all the time. What's your what's your scouting procedure? I'm assuming you're still out there scouting to some degree.
Mhm.
Do you utilize cameras? Are you boots on the ground, or what's your tactics for
Yeah.
getting that?
It's definitely cameras. I'm amazed at the amount of deer that I would never ever see if I didn't have cameras. And that camera process is also extremely important in this whole pressure deal too. You gotta, my favorite camera spots are ones on the edge of cover that I can drive my vehicle to, and I can either reach out the window or just step outside the vehicle, change the chip out, take it back and check it. Again, it's that whole low impact. Don't let them know you're there. They obviously see, you know, farm traffic, vehicle traffic, things like that. So they're used to that. But when you have to actually lay boot down, you know, you don't want. I never will put a cell, or I'm sorry, unless it's a cell phone camera where it sends pictures to my cell phone. I'm not putting it anywhere near bedding, you know, in bedding area. I'm putting it close to it where I can get to it easy. But you know, you can screw up your whole hunting by trying to put your trail camera in to get pictures near an area that you shouldn't be laying boots down.
Hmm. So, how many cameras do you primarily run across the farm?
Probably around 15,
Okay.
I'd say. I'm guessing a little bit in that range, 15 to 20 range.
Are they all standard cameras, or do you have any of those going that are those cellular ones?
So last year, we had one cell camera going. And when I say we, it's I got a hunting partner that we do the filming with and everything. it's him and I, but we've now have three of them. So
Okay.
we got the bug, and they're pretty wild. They work, and like I say, we're gonna put them in probably early September. We're gonna go in into some bedding area, some of this tight cover, probably on a real windy, rainy day. Set them up in the air a little bit on a either an existing scrape or a mock scrape where we can leave it the entire season, and we'll get pictures. And if if we get pictures of something we want, and act on that in terms of our hunting.
Okay. Um, from the okay, so you're scouting primarily with cameras, and then you're picking up deer that you're interested in from those. When you're and I know you're filming your hunts with your hunting partner, and I want to definitely get into that here in a few.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going through and analyzing all those photos and trying to come up with your you know hit list, I guess if you want to call it that. Um, what are you looking for? Are you looking? Do you narrow it down to like one or two, or just specific deer, or are you looking for an age class? Um,
Yeah.
how do you come up with your list?
I'm average at best at seeing a random buck and being able to say if he's 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. The 1 year olds and the 2 year olds are pretty simple. 3 year olds are relatively simple, but so my method with this is I need to build a history with particular deer. So when I started years ago, I dreamt of 3 year old bucks. I mean, I would shoot 3 year old bucks and be thrilled. Like they were very, very rare. Um, as I've evolved and as I've continued to get, higher numbers of those older age class bucks, I mean, I'm to the point now where I'm not shooting anything unless it's 4.5 years old. Um, and the best way I can do that to be 100% sure is to build a history with a particular deer. So I might see that deer as a 2 year old or maybe not even recognize him until he's a 3 year old. But once they get to that 3 year old stage, they usually have enough characteristics, individual characteristics that I can identify them. So from that point, they get on that list if you want.
Mm.
And as a 3 year old, man, you're pulling for them hardcore because there isn't anybody within several miles of me that would pass those deer. So those are the ones that are extremely susceptible. Most people wouldn't even do the 2 year olds, but they get to three, forget about it. Um, so once they get to three, hey, some of them make it to four, and I look at it. It's the cumulative effect. It's a numbers game. When we first started, we were lucky to have any 3 year olds. All right, when we start passing them, you start securing more ground, giving them those sacred areas that they can go. All of a sudden you've got maybe two or three 3 year olds, and then you're not going to kill all those. So then maybe the next year, all of a sudden, hey, we got a 4 year old on the farm. And then next year after that, it's a numbers game. You'll have, you get more past 1.5 years old, but then you got more 2 year olds, and then next year olds, next year olds, and so at this point, I mean, heck, I got, you know, on my small amount of acreage here, I can think of 4 deer right now that are 4.5 or older. I mean, I got a couple 5.5 year olds. So that's where I'm at in the process. Will that change in a few years? It might. I mean, I don't know if I'll get to the point where I'm not sure.
Okay. So so obviously QDM started a while ago for you, and obviously, you know, you were starting off passing those 3 year olds and then on up and on and up and up. I wanted to remind everybody too that, you know, you're you're in central New York, and New York typically is not known for um, advanced age class.
Hmm.
That's again, like you said, people aren't passing up 3 year olds, but you've been able to implement a QDM on your farm and kind of flip that age class and be able to give yourself some options of getting some older deer. How long how long would you say for if there's folks out there listening that have a farm, they've got a little bit of control in it. Maybe they're not doing quite the QDM that you are, but they're interested in it. Passing some of those younger bucks and letting them grow up for, the numbers game as you call it. What was like your time frame on the farm that you really noticed some of those shifts that you're really starting to see those older bucks, just be there?
It's gonna take, I mean, depending on where you're starting from, I mean, some farms are gonna be better than others, or some areas are gonna be better than others. I mean, if you've got a couple 3-year-olds, when you decide to start doing this, well, your results are gonna be a little bit quicker. Um, just if it's, again, it's the numbers game, if you've got 2 or 3 3-year-olds to start with, well, next year you could automatically have a 4-year-old around. The other thing I tell people too, as a rule, there's more mature deer than people think there are. Like, if they're not running cameras in the right place or enough of them, they might not ever see them. I mean, I wouldn't even see some of these deer. I wouldn't know they existed. I can think of several deer that I've killed, mature deer. I never saw them on the hoof until the day I killed them. So, I had them on camera. I knew they were around, but I never saw them. So, as a rule, probably people don't give their area enough credit for having, I'm not saying there's going to be 5 or 6 mature deer around, but usually there's one. Sometimes there's more than that, even on some heavily hunted areas. But yeah, I mean, you can make it better obviously by making those, getting more of them into that mature class. But it's gonna take 2 3 years. Quite frankly, the people part of it is harder than the deer part, because if you got people on your ground hunting a certain way or trespassing a certain way, that takes sometimes that takes longer than the deer.
No, yeah, definitely, fair enough. Um, I wanna skip a little bit here and talk about you and your filming, and folks don't know listening in yet, but you've got um, you've got an interesting affiliation that I think would also interest people that I want to talk a little bit about. Can you can you give us a background on how you came about um, getting on the pro staff for Midwest Whitetails and the work that you've done and the work that you're doing with them now?
Yeah. So Midwest Whitetail started, I'm not even, the early 2000s. And all it was an online show. It was on realtree.com. And it was Midwest Whitetail with Bill Winke. Started off really small, but it was one of the very first online shows out there. And obviously, we all know where that's gone in the last few years, and probably will continue to go. But I started watching it. I was a sucker for all the outdoor shows and just loved watching it. So really, the one of the main reasons I decided to give it a shot was because I was killing some of these older age class bucks and seeing them. And sometimes when you have success, people tend to doubt you or maybe say, you're not doing something above board. So I was talking to my friend Ethan, who has the same passion I do for this stuff, and decided to say, hey, you know what? One way to like prove that what we're doing is for real and that we really see these things is, let's take the video camera. So we started doing it, just totally on our own, not very good at it. We're really still not that very good at it, to be honest with you. But we started doing it and just built up a little bit of a library of footage. And that Midwest Whitetail show started to grow, and he was looking for people to be on the pro staff. So we sent in our stuff. Long story short, he chose us to be on it. And the cool thing about that website, if people haven't ever heard of it or seen it, you hear the name Midwest Whitetail and automatically think, well, it's Midwest. But what Bill did was he has different regions on the website. So Midwest Whitetail is, Bill Winke hunting his home farm with several of his pro staff. But under that affiliation, he also has different regions of the country. So Ethan and I were in the east section. So it's pretty neat because there's not much eastern or northeastern hunting anywhere to be found. And on that website, there's a whole section, and there's various other pro staff, and that's hunting out of the Northeast.
Okay. How long how long have you been with Midwest Whitetail team?
Mm, I think it's been probably 8 years or so, be my
Okay.
guess.
All right. Um, yeah, and so I went on there and took a look. If anybody wants to go to it to find you, there's some really cool videos on there that I saw you and Ethan in. Uh, again, you go to the Midwest Whitetails page, and then um, there's that East drop down menu, and then there's a whole bunch of videos listed in there from previous seasons. So there's a lot that people can go check out if they'd like to.
Yeah, we're excited this year. We're doing a little bit different format. In the past, he would have a weekly show for each region. Um, but Bill himself started doing a daily video blog of his own hunts, and it got a lot of viewership. Like people, basically you can just follow his season. So this year, that's how all the pages are going to be run. So in essence, Ethan and I, if we don't hunt every day by any means, but all our hunts, we're going to upload them onto the website, and you can just follow along as we go, kind of tell that whole story. So I don't know about you, but for me, that's the part I love. I mean, I love watching the whole story in somebody's season. How are they going? What bucks are they going after, and all that strategy stuff that goes along with it. I mean, I'm just, I love that stuff. I don't know about you, but that's a new format this year, and I think it's gonna be great.
No, that sounds pretty cool. That stuff eats me up. That
Yeah.
that's definitely interesting. Speaking of, um, kind of how the season's going to go, I'm assuming that you're with those cell crammers that you're running, you got to be pulling cards. How's your hit list looking for this season, and you have any predictions going into how your season's going to be looking this year?
Yeah, we do. We knew at the end of last season that we had probably one of the best carryover crops of bucks that we've ever had. And again, it's that numbers game. The longer you do it, you get more and more into that age class, and then they get smarter, and obviously they don't get killed. So we knew at the end of last season we were going to have a heck of a crop. I've been able to find not all those deer yet, but a lot of them don't come into our area until the fall. Um, so yeah, I mean, for instance, there's a buck that we've have multiple encounters with. Probably never had a buck. Last year was a 4.5-year-old buck, and I've never had a deer that I've encountered so many times and never get a shot at. We call that deer Snow White. He's an awesome buck. He's got a white face. I've never seen a deer with such a white face, hence the name. So I've got some pictures of him this year. He, for me, is probably number one on the list. It's not like he's, as a 5.5-year-old buck, is some giant rack. I mean, he's probably 135, 140-inch deer. He didn't really grow a lot from last year, but again, it's the age, it's the history, it's all those encounters. So for me, he's probably my sentimental number one. But we actually have some deer that would score higher than that. That I'm by no means gonna turn down a chance if they present it.
All right. Well, at least it sounds like you got some options there this season. For that Snow White buck, do you anticipate uh, your what do you think the best time this season is that you get a crack at him? Is he, that you've got him fairly patterned? You think early season you're going to, have some chances, or is it something that you think later in the season you're going to have better odds at?
It's going to be interesting because I've seen deer change from 4 years old to 5 years old. Um, So as a 4-year-old, he was fairly visible in that October time frame. Um, we hunted him last year out of made cart blind we made, and we had him like in the field several nights and could never get a shot, but we got lots of video footage of him. Um, but I've seen them change when they turn into a 5-year-old. Sometimes they're not so visible. It's just another age, you know, they get a little older. So I have some really good setups for early season this year. Um, and that the reason for that is we planted our corn late this year. We had a late spring, lots of rain. So I know for a fact my cornfields are going to be standing into November. So I've got some setups based on that in his home area where we have corn, but I've also have some green cover crop fields. I'll call them. They're clover, and I've got some red oaks in close proximity to that. You know, right to his home area. So I have I think I have a really good setup in October for him, but I guess I gotta see how he's going to respond now that he's a year older, and you know, um, but if not, then obviously we get towards November and they're all going to be on their feet at some point, no matter how
Yep.
old they are.
Hmm. Well, I wish you good luck there, my friend. I hope to see some pictures of you and Snow White here soon.
Yeah, me too. You know, obviously the weather's starting to change here a little bit, and you know, I got a picture of them, so you know how it goes. The obsession just grows day by day, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm not sure mine stopped since December of last year.
And mine hasn't either, but you know, it's just it starts to grow again, I guess, as you get this time of year. You know, they're full grown now, and you know, they're gonna shed their velvet here any time, and yeah, it gets exciting. You just gotta, you know, you gotta watch that shift. I don't know if you know, if you see that in your ground, but a lot of these bucks, like I know some of the ones right now we're watching aren't going to necessarily be here in the fall. They shift. You know, they'll their home core area, not all of them, but some of them will shift. So you get your hopes super high this time of year, but those aren't necessarily the same deer that are going to be here in October.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right about that. I think that's a consensus almost everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
So I wanted to hit on one last thing, and this, if anybody's is gone through your Instagram feed, you can tell that obviously you're passionate about deer, you're passionate about bow hunting, but you're also passionate about fitness. And I thought it would be interesting if I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit here, uh, kind of targeting the bow hunters out there, and hopefully people are already have this in mind all summer, but I guess it's never too late to start. What being kind of fitness minded guy, do you have like I don't know, one or two or even a set of like what would you recommend go-to exercises be for anybody looking to get a little bit more prepared for the upcoming bow season?
Um, it's going to be hard to narrow it down to certain exercises. I'll say that you need to you need to focus on your core. I mean, your core. You start talking about sitting in a tree stand or in odd positions for long periods of time. It's extremely important that your core is strong. That's actually something I've learned the hard way over the years. I didn't necessarily. I guess I sometimes overlooked that. You know, I'd work on all the other stuff, but the core, and I you know, through some back injuries and things, I've realized the importance of that. And then that obviously goes right into deer hunting because everybody thinks, why do I need fitness sitting in a tree stand? Well, I would say you need fitness for, I don't care what you're doing in life. If you're more physically fit, you're going to be better at what you do because it's whether it's mental, physical, you know, if you feel better physically, you're going to feel better mentally. So, yeah, I don't, you know, I don't necessarily train because I deer hunt. I train because I want to be better at everything in life.
Fair enough. No, I like that. Well, Eric, I really appreciate you you coming on and talking about everything here with me. If there is there any place that if people want to go find out more information about you that they can? Obviously, probably one of the easiest is over at Midwest Whitetails, but where else on social media can they find you?
Yeah, it's just to be clear, it's Midwell, no S on the end. So it's MidwestWhitetail.com. You can find me there under the East section. And like I say, this year, the cool thing is it's going to be basically a diary of my whole season. So definitely check that out. And you can check out, the whole site's great. I mean, Bill Winke is, he's a legend in the whitetail world. So he's amazing. He's one of the guys that I've learned a ton from him. So you can check him out, the other social media stuff, Instagram. My Instagram, I think it's EEH1981, if you're interested in that. I don't do a ton on there, but I do some things. I'll probably do some more based on deer season here coming up. So any of that stuff is great. You can learn a lot from social media. Instagram's probably my favorite, but sure, anything there would be great. I appreciate you thinking of me. I don't consider myself an expert by any means, but I'm always looking to learn and just share the passion with people that think the same way that you and I do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with everybody. Well, there it is, my friends. Hope you enjoyed that podcast. I had a lot of fun talking with Eric. Thanks again to him for coming on the show and taking time out of his schedule. Just a reminder, everybody, please go on to wherever you get your podcast, whether that be iTunes, Stitcher, Castbox, Google Play. Leave me a review, 5 stars or 1 stars. I've got big shoulders, but it's the only way that I can gauge how well I'm doing. I've got a lot of really good content coming up. A bunch of podcasts scheduled to record, and I think you're really going to enjoy these guests coming up. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this podcast. Hope you all have a great week. Until next time, take care and God bless.